Hey, great to see you this morning. Today we're beginning a study over just these next few weeks as we lead up to Easter, and we could essentially say it's like from the upper room to the empty tomb, and that's where we're going to be building up to over these next few weeks. And today we're really honing in on the upper room. Now, something that we'll see in a moment that's somewhat peculiar to that culture is the washing of feet. And if you're somewhat aware around our world, every culture seems to have those particular customs or things, whether they're present or in the past. And so, for example, if you live in South Korea, you may not know this, but in South Korea, it's actually considered rude to tip, which is unusual to us. Many of us have been servers, and you know how it is. If you're a server, you depend on the tips, but for them, it's considered almost an insult. Or if you're in the Middle East, if you show the bottom of your feet, for whatever reason, that's deemed to be an insult. If you're in some Asian countries and you slurp your soup, that's actually considered a compliment of all things. Who knew? Other places around the world, you need to take off your shoes as you enter into a home. It's just custom. And then we all know that you can really track in a lot of different things and dirt and grime and whatnot into a home. And it's along those lines that we see in John 13 that Jesus, he is going to be washing the disciples' feet. And as he washes those disciples' feet, he's gonna make a statement that says, "You need to do as I have done." And what we need to do whenever we hear a statement like that is we need to step back and say, what exactly is Jesus getting at here? What exactly does he mean? Are we supposed to be washing each other's feet when you come to church? Is that something that we need to institute? Is that something that needs to be present? Or is he saying something else? And what I would present to you is that he is definitely saying something else to us. He's saying something of much greater significance and of much greater depth to us. As we read John 13, Jesus washes his disciples' feet. And what exactly does he mean by that? Well, for example, I would say that in the book of Acts, we don't actually see the washing of feet as the activities of the church are described. And so you read about things like the studying of scriptures, the adherence to the apostles' teaching, caring for the needy and the poor. You see prayer, you see the importance of gathering, but we don't see the washing of feet there. And again, why is that? Well, I would say it's because what Jesus is challenging the disciples to and what he's challenging us to is something, again, of greater depth. I think in a lot of ways, it's the working out of Jesus into our lives. What we read about Galatians chapter 2, verse 20. And the Apostle Paul, he says here that I have been crucified with Christ, and I no longer live, but Christ lives in me. The life I live in the body, I live by faith in the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me. And this is something that we are to do. And so when Jesus says we are supposed to do what it is that he has done for us, I think in a lot of ways, Paul is referencing that when he talks about dying to self to live for him. And so what exactly is this greater meaning? What exactly is this thing that Jesus is teaching us that goes beyond the surface? Well, that's what we're going to get into as we begin this journey in John chapter 13. And what you find here in John 13 is really the last 24 hours of Jesus' life through the rest of the following chapters, and then what happens after his resurrection. And so John applies a lot of attention to what happens the last 24 hours of Jesus' life and then onward until his ascension. And so we're going to pick up in John chapter 13, verse 1. It was just before the Passover festival that Jesus knew that the hour had come for him to leave this world and go to the Father. And so he knows that his time has come. The clock is ticking down. Having loved his own, and this is an odd phrase that John seems to throw in there, having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. And it's in reference to the end being his death. But he doesn't write it the way that maybe I would write it or some of you would write it. He doesn't focus on what Jesus says or what Jesus does. Instead, it's just sort of this kind of a throwaway phrase, but it's just something that just gets interjected in there. It's like John is almost leaking this out of him. He's saying, Jesus realizes his hour has come and he's going to get into everything that goes beyond that. But then just in the middle of that, he's reflecting, he's hit by the love that Christ had displayed for him on the cross. Because John's writing this much later on, decades later after the event. And as he's doing that, he just thinks upon himself and he says, oh, and he just loved us to the end. I mean, think about those moments of pressure for us, those moments of challenge for us. What is it that leaks from us in those moments? Like, not literally leak from you. If you got something leaking, you need to get that checked out. But it's like, what are those, like, somebody cuts you off, or the kid is, maybe one of your kids is acting out, or you're dealing with maybe an unreasonable boss, or maybe you got some relational strain. What is leaking out of you in those moments? Well, as John is writing this gospel, dealing with pressure in the world that he is in, he just comes back to, and he loved us to the end. It's just this overflow of his heart. And then then he gets back onto the storyline. The evening meal was in progress, and the devil had already prompted Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot, to betray Jesus. And so the devil has put that onto Judas's heart. He still has to respond to it. In some ways, you might even argue he has a chance to maybe turn the other direction. He's not going to, but he's been prompted. Beginning in the verse 3, Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power. Great glory there. And that he had come from God and was returning to God, so he knew how it was all going to work out. So what does he do? So he gets up from the meal, took off his outer clothing, and he wrapped a towel around his waist. And this foot washing is going to then take place. Now, what's interesting about the foot washing isn't that it's happening, okay? This was a common thing. It was dirt roads. They had open-toed sandals. I mean, there was a lot of mud. There was a lot of dirt on the feet. So foot washing was very common in middle class and above type of homes. That was a normal thing to take place. What's interesting and important is not that it's happening, it's who is doing it. And what Jesus, as he is essentially displaying his ministry to them, what he wants them to do, as he has done, is first of all this. He's teaching them that his ministry is one of service and not of status. One of service and not of status. So he knows what's going to happen. God has put everything under his control. And what does he decide to do with that? Well, he decides to serve. It's been said that service is about serving, and status is about how many people serve you. And Jesus in this moment takes off his outer garment. That garment, that's important. There is some reference to it in the Old Testament as it relates to the high priest. It would have been a piece of cloth, it would have been like almost a coat that would have been one piece of cloth, and it would have been a garment that would have gone from the neck down to the ankles. It would have been a rather expensive piece of clothing, and it wouldn't have been common for people to wear a garment like this, but he had one. And Jesus takes that off, and that might even be reference to sort of his glory. He's taking that off. Now, a high priest in the Old Testament would have worn that type of a garment all throughout the year. But one day of the year, that high priest would take that garment off. Everybody that would see the high priest roaming around through the streets in the city that he would be in through the year would know that that priest was somebody of significance because of the garment that he had on. It would be like going into Aspen. You see somebody with a mink coat. If you got one of those, good for you. But there's something to be said about having a really nice coat. But there's a time you take it off, and you take that glory off. And so the high priest would take it off once a year, and what would they do? They would then go into the Holy of Holies. It was a place they were only allowed to go into once a year. And they would go into the Holy of Holies. They would have an ephod on. They would put that on. It was part of the ceremony. They would have a rope tied to their ankle in case something were to happen to them, because nobody could go in after them. They would have to pull them out. And then they would go in with the blood of a bull and the blood of a goat, and they would pour that blood onto the mercy seat, the covering of the Ark of the Covenant. And they were in essence going in there to pour out that blood, and they were taking the sins of Israel into that Holy of Holies with them. They were carrying those sins in there. And then, after they poured the blood from the sacrifices, the idea was that God would give them forgiveness and grace and mercy, and they would leave, and then a year later they would go back in. And so what Jesus is displaying for us in this moment is he has glory, this outer garment, and he takes it off. Why? Because he's going to serve us. It's like what Paul writes in Philippians chapter 2, who being the very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. He wasn't going to use this glory to garner status. Rather, he would make himself nothing. He would remove the glory that he had in heaven, taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness, and being found in the appearance as a man. He humbled himself, being obedient to death, and even death on a cross. And so all of our sins would come upon him. And if you read the rest of Philippians 2, it's then that he is ultimately allowed to return to heaven, and he sits down at the right hand of God, and he is given that glory once again. And so Jesus takes off his outer garment. Verse 5, after that, he poured water in a basin as this towel is wrapped around him. It's the only towel that he would use, and he began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with the towel that was wrapped around him. And so imagine the scene, okay? This is important. It's not like Jesus is, again, just telling you to go and think about put others first, although he is indeed telling us that in a variety of different places. He's telling us so much more. You got a bowl, you got water, you got a towel, you got 12 men, 24 feet, and he starts washing them. Doesn't change the towel. He takes all the mud, all the mire, all the dirt, all off of them, cleans them up real nice, onto his towel, wrings it out, gets some more water, same thing again and again and again. We don't know how long it took, but he takes all of their dirt and he transfers it unto himself, okay? He's taken everything that was impure about them, and he puts it upon him. And while he was righteous and while he was clean, he now has taken that upon himself, and they have received his cleanliness. It's like what the scriptures tell us in 2 Corinthians chapter 5, that God made him who had no sin, okay, the one that's clean, to be sin on our behalf, so that we might experience the righteousness of God. Yeah. And you've had kind of these moments, right? Whenever you walk with the Lord and you realize, like, I need what he has. I need that forgiveness from him. And he has taken that upon us. Because here's the catch. His ministry, Jesus' ministry, is one of forgiveness, not condemnation. The devil would tell you a lie and make you think that you have to have your act together, your life together to come to church, to be here. The devil wants you to think that you have to have it figured out, because if you come here, you're going to be condemned. But that's not what Jesus' end goal is. Certainly there are moments of conviction. There are moments when we realize, like, oh man, I've come up short here. But Jesus' ministry is not one to leave us in that place, because he got on his knees, and he got a towel and some water, and he began to clean these disciples' feet. And it's a typology, it's a foreshadowing what he's going to do for us on the cross, and offering us the forgiveness and grace that that each and every single one of us need. It's like, in my home, I'll cook, especially when it's cold, I won't go outside and grill. I'll just cook hamburgers on a skillet, and the grease from the pan starts to come out, and it gets on the stove. And then whenever I'm done cooking, then I have to go back and clean. And this is one of the reasons why I don't clean very often. And so I go back or cook for that matter. And so I go back and I start cleaning, and all the grease, it gradually does come off, but then it's all over you have to use paper towels, because if you use a cloth, it ruins it. And then inevitably I touch myself and it's all over me, and I'm a filthy mess. But the stove's great. The stove's clean. And in a way, Jesus just kind of enters into our lives, and he wants to take that off of us and clean us, not condemn us, clean us as the scriptures tell us. And that is what he wants to get across to these disciples. They don't understand them, but eventually they will understand. And so then he came to Simon Peter. We don't know how far in he is. Maybe he's 5 men in. Maybe he's 10 men in. Maybe he's 11 in. Maybe Simon's the last one. We don't know. He came to Simon Peter and said to him, Lord, are you going to wash my feet? I've seen you multiply bread. I've seen you cause the blind to see. I've seen you've healed the leper. I've seen so much of you, Lord. You're going to wash my feet? And Jesus says to him, you don't realize now what I'm doing. I have a purpose. I have something right now that I'm doing that's so much more than cleaning your stinky, grimy, dirty feet, okay? You don't understand right now what I'm doing. But later you will understand. No, said Peter, you shall never wash my feet. And Jesus answered, unless I wash you, you will have no part of me. And notice what he said to Peter in that moment. He says, Peter, I know you don't understand. I know you don't, but later you will. But I got to do this because I got a purpose here. Jesus' ministry is one of fulfilling his purposes, not resolving our misunderstandings. He's saying, Peter, I know you don't understand it. I know you just saw me come into Jerusalem, and they're crying out, Hosanna, Hosanna, Hosanna. You've had moments you've seen where they wanted to make me king. I know you didn't understand why I didn't grab a hold of that, but later you're going to understand. And isn't that kind of the thing for so many of us? Because he's asking Peter, he said, I need you to trust me. And isn't that kind of that calling that God has on so many of us? I know you don't understand why that relationship didn't work out after you were with that person for a year or two. But later, he's calling us to something. He said, later you're going to understand. I know you don't understand why you didn't get that promotion. But later, you're going to understand. I know you don't understand why the deal didn't work out. Why that house that you wanted didn't become yours, but later you're going to understand. Because you prayed about it. I've prayed about things like that. And he's saying to so many of us, don't let your faith rest in those types of things working out for us, because his purposes are going to prevail. And he says to so many of us, but later, you'll understand. Sometimes it's in this life, and sometimes it's in the next. And often I'll have people come to me, and maybe even some of you have done this from time to time with me or others, and you'll come to a pastor, and we just have to, as a pastor, there's this great temptation that we all have to want to give you an answer. Like, I want to resolve that issue for you. I want you to feel better. But I know there's a certain level of trauma and there's a certain level of experience of pain that nothing I say is going to make that okay. And the temptation that we as a pastor, even some of you, as you talk to friends and family, there's just something that there's just a point at which we have to be comfortable with just saying to them, you know what? I don't know. And this one time in the Bible, Jesus said to Peter, he said, there's just things in life that we aren't going to understand, but he promises us later we will. And when I'm talking with somebody about a child with cancer, I want to tell them an answer. I want to say Jesus came into this world and he's going to relate to that pain. I think there's some value in that, but inevitably, God's the only one that's going to be able to give you a real answer to that one. I don't have those answers. And what happens with Peter, though, what we find is that we see this in real time. We don't have to just wait until we die and go into heaven and meet Peter one day. Like, we see Peter in real time in the scriptures, like he does come to understand some of these things. 1 Peter, 2 Peter, his theology has grown. It says, in all this you greatly rejoice, not in the good things in life necessarily happening to you, though now for a little while you have had to suffer grief in all kinds of trials. These have come so that the proven genuineness of your faith, of greater worth than gold, which perishes even though refined by fire, your genuineness of your faith may result in praise and glory and honor when Jesus Christ is revealed. He's saying there were things that I didn't understand, but now I do. And so I got to write you this letter. I got to tell you that when you start to lean into him and you start to trust in Jesus, he is going to prove the genuineness of your faith in ways that you can't even imagine. And so it begins to click a little bit in this moment for Simon Peter. Then, Lord, not just my feet, but my hands and my head as well. If you're telling me I'm not going to have any part of you, I can't have that. He's referencing a relationship. Peter's focused on the action, the regiment, you might even say. He's focused on that. He's not realizing that if he cuts Jesus off from that, then he's not going to be able to experience that relationship with him. You might say with Peter is somebody who is strong-willed. But I don't know if he's stubborn. It's been said by somebody else that stubborn is short for stupid. So just hang on to that. We want to be strong-willed for the right things. We want to lean into the right things. But if you're just stubborn, you don't change. And Peter, he is strong-willed, absolutely. But he realizes, I don't want to be stubborn in this moment. I don't want to lose you. And so Jesus answered, those who have had a bath need only to wash their feet. Their whole body is clean, and you are clean. Though not every one of you, for he knew there was going to be one that would betray him, and that is why he said, not everyone was clean. And I already kind of alluded to it, but what we learn here of Jesus' ministry is this, is that it is one of relationship and not of regiment. Like we can get so focused on the things that we have to do for the Lord that we can lose the Lord. We get so focused on the things that we are doing that we forget about the one that we're doing it for. And so we should gather like this. You should learn about the scriptures and allow those truths to cut deep into your heart and to do things for you that you cannot and I cannot do on my own. We need to allow that to happen. We need to worship. We need to serve. We need to help. All of those things are important, but we're doing it for the end goal of a relationship with him that is only available through his forgiveness. And what Jesus alludes to here also is a moment in which you come to faith in Christ. And the only way that you can have that relationship with him, like as he says to Peter, is if you allow him to do what only he can do, which is to wash you, to clean you, to make you whiter than snow, as Isaiah says in the Old Testament. But then we have to continually come back. Because as we walk through this world, in the proverbial open-toed sandals of our hearts and our souls, we're getting dirty. And as we get dirty, we got to continually come back to him and allow him to wash us. While the relationship is not severed, in order for us to be made right with him on that daily basis, to be walking in sync with him, we have to return. We have to return. We have to come back again and again and again and allow him to do what it is again that only he can do. And then verse 12, when he had finished washing their feet, he put on his clothes and returned to his place. And so you can imagine, so he comes in with the one single piece garment, he takes it off. He gets up from this comfortable place, he gets up and he serves. He does what he can do in that moment. He's dirty, he's filthy, but then he takes off the towel and he puts back on the garment and he returns back to his seat, returns back to his glory. Do you understand what I have done for you? He asked them. It's a rhetorical question. You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, for that is what I am. Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet. And is he again telling us and commanding us to do that? Certainly you can at times. At weddings, sometimes the bride and the groom will do that. Sometimes in certain Orthodox Christian sects of the Christian faith, you'll have annual foot washings that take place. And I believe God honors all of that. He honors all of that. But again, it is so much more than that he's bringing to us. And he says, now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you should also wash one another's feet. You should forgive. You should serve. You should live in relationship with one another. I have set you an example that you should do as I have done for you. And very truly I tell you that no servant is greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. Now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you do them, if you live them out. And what we will then have from here, if you read into the other Gospels, is then Jesus breaks bread with them. He takes them into a time of communion, following this very symbolic act of washing their feet. And then he's going to point towards what he's going to do for us ultimately on the cross. And he invites them into this moment in which they can reflect on his body being broken and the juice that were, for them, it would be the wine that represents his blood that is being shed. In Luke chapter 22, Jesus would say these words following this foot washing. And he took bread and gave thanks, and he broke it. And he gave it to them, saying, this is my body given for you. Do this in remembrance of me. And in the same way, after the supper, he took the cup, saying, "This cup is the new covenant in my blood, which is poured out for you." And so for each and every one of us who have called on the name of Jesus Christ to be our Savior, we have come before him with dirt and with mud and with mire and with brokenness and with shortcomings, and we have acknowledged that we have fallen short of his glory. But we do not have to stay in that place, because the one who could redeem us did redeem us. And we are not treated as we deserved, but we are treated as he deserved. And we are able to enter into this glorious relationship with our Heavenly Father through him. And so every week, as he instituted in this moment, we take a few moments to recognize and to remember and to reflect and to ask for that washing, that spiritual washing, so that we can be with him, because we want to have a part with him and we don't want to in any way, shape, or form be separated. And so what I want to invite you into now is a time of communion. And if by chance you didn't receive those elements when you came in, raise your hand. Our team will be happy to bring that to you. But in this moment, I just want to encourage you and implore you to reflect, to remember, and to thank him for the grace that he's made available to you. And as we come out of this time of communion in a few moments, our team will lead us in one more song of worship.